Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Tonight's video I'm going to be going over some popular trigger offerings by Geissele, going over the SSA-E, the SDE, the SSP M4 curve trigger, the SSP straight bow, and then this guy here, which is the S3G. These triggers here are by no means the only offerings that Geissele offers, but I feel that after perusing the various internet forums for years, these are the ones that get talked about the most, especially when it comes to something like a combat or a fighting rifle. Obviously, there are some better, different offerings for people who do compete in competitions and whatnot. Right. So like I mentioned up front, talking about the types of triggers, I said there's an SSP M4 curved and an SSP straight bow. Anybody who doesn't know, the SDE is the straight bow version of the SSAE. I don't know why they have different names for the M4 curved than the straight trigger, while the SSP is the same thing. It's just one's curved and one's straight. And then also anybody who doesn't know, the S3G is the curved version, where the probably I'd say the more popular is the SD3G, which is the straight bow version of this same trigger here. I do want to say I know there's lots of videos that go over trigger comparisons already, and I often don't try to cover things that are covered very, very well already. But I do feel that something like triggers is something that's very subjective. I mean, there's personal preference plays a huge part in it, but there are just some hard facts and data that I can offer here and I can discuss, and then I'll just give my opinions on them and some of the things that I've encountered to hopefully offer some insight into anybody who's looking at picking up any one of these triggers. All right, so right off the bat, for any of the YouTube police out there, since I am going to be actually pulling triggers on these guns, I do want to show and confirm these guns are empty. As you see these two here, magazines are out, the breeches are open. Same thing here with my Mark 18. Magazines out, breeches are open, no ammunition in the guns. All right, in some of my earlier videos, I did post, I had some videos that I posted comparing two-stage triggers and single-stage triggers, so I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this one here, but it is important to talk about. So for anybody who's not aware, the SSA-E and the SDE, again, same trigger, just with the SDE being the flat bow version of the SSA-E. They're called two-stage triggers. The SSP is a single-stage trigger, and then the S3G is kind of a hybrid between the two, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I'm sorry, this one's the S3G. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but a lot of people I see on the forums asking, what's the better trigger? Should I go single stage? Should I go two stage? Should I go SSAE or SSA or maybe one of the other offerings? These triggers that I mentioned here, these are the ones that I have experience with the most, or really the only experience. Never mess with an SSA, but from what I understand, it's just a little bit of a heavier version of the SSAE. And I also haven't experienced the SSAEX, or maybe it's just the SSAX. I can't remember. I know that one's really starting to become very, very popular as well. But I will say that when it comes to choosing a two-stage or a single stage, that really comes, it really factors on personal preference. But I do also feel that it factors in how you plan to use the rifle. My personal preference for blasters, and I typically like to go with a single stage. And single stages, let me get this one out of here because that's not a single stage. Single stage, let me try them both here. What that basically means is that there is there's no slack. In fact, let me highlight the two-stage first. When you have a two-stage trigger, as you can see here, there's a little bit of slop there, and that's considered the first stage. And then there's a wall, and then the trigger breaks. As you see, two stages. Slop is the first stage. Pulling through the wall is the second stage. Whereas you take something like the SSP, which is a single stage, there is no slop at all. Nothing at all. It's just straight. Once you start putting pressure on the trigger, it breaks. The S3G, which I will say is definitely not, or well, Bill Geissele says that it shouldn't be used for bench shooting, shouldn't be used for competition. I'm sorry, let me take that back. Shouldn't be used for target shooting, shouldn't be used for combat. What the S3G and what S3G stands for is Super 3 Gun. So for 3 gun shooters that need to make really quick shots, um, they say that the S3G is a hybrid between the first single stage and 2 stage. And kind of what they mean by that is, like, as you see here, there's not any slop or take up like you notice on the SSA-E. There's a little bit of creep, and then it breaks. There is zero discernible wall. They're just like on the SSE, where I mentioned you could see me flop my finger on it and you could see the little bit of movement in the trigger. And then the SSP, where as soon as I started pulling, the hammer dropped. It's just a little bit of a roll, and then it breaks. But again, has zero discernible wall. You can't even really feel where it breaks. And the SD3G should feel the same, except like I mentioned again, the difference being that the SD3G has a straight bow versus the curved on it. A lot of people out there, they have a hard time paying Geissele money. I think retail on these things are about $240, and I agree. I wouldn't pay that either. But between all the different sales that they have out there, along with the used market that you can find, if you can find a credible source, triggers aren't something that normally wear very much. As long as they're not beat to crap, you can be pretty pretty dependable that they're going to be decent. In fact, my first Geissele trigger was the one in this Mark 18 here, being the SSP, after trying the LaRue MBT1 and then the MBT2 and not being very impressed with them at all. I wanted to try the SSP, and I got this used. Can't remember how many rounds the guy said were on it, but it definitely was a huge difference between the LaRue. I mean, it's a completely different league than the LaRue triggers. So, and that should be, because it comes with quite a higher price tag. But very, very often you can find these Geissele triggers on sale for much, much lower. In fact, I think right now, as of 12/29/23, I think it's Primary Arms is running these on sale. They're like $170 for the SSA-E. So, no reason why you can't pick one of these triggers up. But let me dive a little bit deeper into each of these triggers. I'm not going to go through the trigger pull of all the different ones between the SDE, SSA-E, because they really are all the same. One thing I love about Geissele triggers is they are definitely super consistent. Besides the feel or the action style of the two triggers, SSP being single stage, again, and also a lot of people say that Geissele triggers are just a little bit too light. Some guys will put heavier springs in them. Some guys will avoid them altogether just because of that. And I do admit they are shockingly light, depending on which version you get. The SSP, the SSA-Es, they all only come with one spring, where the S3G comes with 2 different springs. And I'll dive into that a little bit further in a minute here. But between the curved bow and the straight bow SSP, which I have a few each of these in different guns, the trigger pull is the weight is very, very consistent. So this isn't exactly the. I'm sure I'll probably get some comments and people telling me that's not the way you use a trigger scale, but for the sake of filming, this is the way that I'm going to go ahead and do it. And here I have my Wheeler trigger scale pull. Let's go ahead and get it reset. See what this pulls at. See there, just a little over 2.5 pounds. Go through this again. Same thing, just a little over 2.5 pounds. So super, super, super duper light trigger. But I could see, especially if you're used to using a mil-spec trigger or even a LaRue, you're going to be like, that's stupid light. That's just ridiculous. But when you get a little bit of time behind this trigger and you put some rounds down range, you do definitely get used to it. And then you wonder how you ever used anything before. Like my brother-in-law, he just had me upgrade one of his AR a little bit, and he's just got a standard mil spec trigger in it, and I'm like, oh my god, this is like caveman stuff. I don't know how you deal with this, but great light trigger pull, 2.5 pounds. I think that's even lighter than what Geissele advertised on their website. I was really surprised actually when I first got this one, but between this and the two other SSPs I have, they pull exactly the same. All right, so for the SSA-E, I'm gonna have to show this a little bit differently. So, being like I mentioned, this is a two-stage trigger. They do advertise two different pull weights. And typically with two-stage triggers, you have a heavier first stage and then a lighter second stage. And then of course they give you a total pull weight. So on the Geissele website, they do say that the first stage is going to be 2 to 2.5 pounds, and then breaking through and getting the trigger to drop is going to be an additional 0.9 to 1.3. So let's see, I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit here so you guys can see this. When I pull through the first stage and hit that wall, that's stage one, and as you see, it's about 2.5 pounds. I think I did end up pulling a little bit too far. So a little over 2 pounds. I think that's probably closer to being accurate. A little under 2.5. Between 2 and 2.5. So that's your first stage. You see is I hit that wall and then pull through to give a total weight of 3 pounds. Yep, a little over 3 pounds. So that's the total pull through weight. And one of the things about, a two-stage trigger, I typically like to run this on more precision rifles. So for my 18-inch SPR here, along with my 16-inch general purpose rifle, that I do have a medium power variable optic on that one. That I want it to be a blaster, but also want it to be a something that can be used for precision, which I'm running the SDE on. They say that single stage triggers are faster for follow-up shots than two-stage, but even though this is a two-stage, and just like I showed, that you pull it through the two stages, this thing definitely can just be pulled as one, and it's still a very fast trigger. I'll drop in some video of me shooting my Zion 15 that I had SSA-E in also, just because it's two-stage, just because people say that single stages are faster. Apologize for that. I do have my daughter's bird on my shoulder at the moment. She dumped him off on me. That's not to say that a two-stage can't be run very, very quickly. As far as reset of these triggers, let me talk about that for a little bit. So let me turn this around just because I'm wrong-handed and it feels weird holding it the other way. When it comes to reset on these, Geissele's definitely have a very awesome reset on them. Very tactile. There's not much to it at all. There's a creep, or I'm sorry, the reset. There's a little bit of slack from the first stage. Pull, not much movement to the trigger at all. Reset, nice and crisp. Let me get out the SSP. SSP reset. Again, very nice and crisp. Not much travel. That's all there is to it. More travel than the two-stage, at least from the reset on it. But very, 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 very nice. So I do feel that for when it comes to a combat or duty type gun, if you are going to go, whether it be two-stage or single stage, it's a toss-up between the SSA-E/SDE and the SSP. Those are the two best duty offerings offered by Geissele, in my opinion, obviously. But to me, it's between one of those two. So Now I want to move on to the S3G. So as I mentioned before, the S3G is definitely, it is designed to be a combat trigger. It is not recommended to be used for duty or combat or even bench rest shooting. But that's not to say that plenty of people use them exactly for those reasons. First one I've tried out, I've been using Geissele triggers for a few years now. Definitely a huge fan. I've heard people or I've seen people on the forum say that the S3G slash SD3G, it's just too light, it's dangerous, etc., etc. But for my 11.5 build that I have, I want to try out the S3G. And I figured, worst case scenario, I'll just, either put it in the parts bin for another day, or maybe I can sell it to recoup my losses. I will say the S3G does come with 2 different springs on it. And the different springs are the ones that go around the trigger right here. They're not hammer springs. I think Bill Geissele advertises the heavier spring. It's the one that comes on the trigger itself. It gives you a 4.5-pound pull, where the lighter spring will get you down closer to 3.5. So when I first fired this thing, I had the 4.5 in it, and I'd be honest with you, I really didn't care for the way that it felt. I felt that it was too heavy. So I put the lighter spring in it, made it feel a lot more lighter, how I liked it to be, closer in feeling to the SSA-E or SSP in terms of trigger weight, trigger pull weight. But again, like I mentioned, completely different feel for the trigger itself. And like I mentioned, there is no slack to take up like you have on the SSA-E, but there's also no, you get a little bit of creep right there, but you cannot feel the break of the trigger. It's just like a little bit of rolling, and then it just breaks. As far as the weight of the 2 different trigger springs, I can tell you that before I put the other one in, it was right at 4.5 pounds. And putting the lighter spring in here, getting right under 3 pounds. So really, really close to the SSP and SSA-E. That one's closer to 2.5. What makes this trigger so much different, besides the fact that it is kind of hybrid, first stage, second stage, is the insanely fast and short travel and reset. And it is so light, at least the way that it breaks, it is ridiculously fast on follow-up shots. If you want a super fast trigger, this is the one that you want to get. Some of the comments that I had read is guys talking about at the range or in competitions accidentally doing double taps and even triple taps with this trigger. And I will say that when I was on the range shooting it last, I did get a double tap. So probably, follow Bill Geissele's advice. I will say that, your main go-to defense rifle, it may not be an S3G or an SD3G, may not be the exact best pick, especially if you're in a situation like a defense shooting where adrenaline is just coursing through your veins, and fine motor skills are completely out the window. But if you just keep your booger hook off the trigger, you're not going to have any type of accidents like that. Just keep that in mind if you want to go with a trigger like the S3G or SD3G. All right, so lastly, now I'm going to talk about choosing a standard curve trigger or a straight bow. There's allegedly there's advantages with the straight bow, whereas you can use the different, being that your trigger finger isn't forced into a curve. You can change your trigger pull by either pulling, the laws of physics and leverage, pulling further down here to give you a lighter pull, or keeping your finger higher up here for a little bit of heavier pull. I guess if you're making precision shots and you can consciously really kind of think about that to pull. And again, this is the SDE, which is the 2-stage SSA-E straight bow. If you want to pull down here, I mean, okay, sure, I guess you could. That could be advantageous. Or if you maybe want a heavier pull, make sure you concentrate up here to give you a little bit more resistance. Honestly, I don't really feel a difference. I don't mind straight bows. I don't mind curved bows. So really, when it comes down to it, which trigger that I go with, whether it be straight bow or curved, it really comes down to kind of an aesthetics thing. Typically, more classic styled guns. I don't know. I don't really have a rhyme or reason to it. If when I get a build in mind and it starts coming together, I start checking it out, and I'm like, all right, this build would look better with a standard curve bow, or maybe this one here is a little more radical, a little more modern looking. So I'm going to go straight bow on that one. So that's just my personal preference. I'm sure other people could chime in and say, oh no, no, single straight bows are way better for whatever reason. But that is my experience and my preference choosing between the two. Right, so that's about all I got for this video. I hope it could be helpful for someone out there when they're trying to determine which Geissele trigger that they want to order for their build. Do highly recommend them. I do feel they are worth the money 100%. Maybe not MSRP money, but $175, $200, 200 maybe pushing a little bit, but they are absolute just money triggers. I love them very much. So again, hopefully it could be helpful to somebody out there. Thank you for all the new subscribers out there, all the comments and feedback that I've been getting. I do really appreciate that. If you did enjoy the video or any of my other videos, please hit the like and subscribe button, so that you get updates when I do come out with new videos, and helps with the algorithm to help me spread some of my vids out there. Um, really appreciate the feedback I've been getting. I love interacting with you guys. If anybody has any questions on anything whatsoever, feel free to drop one in there. I do try to take the time to respond back to every person who makes a comment, whether it be through a text or even at least just through a like. So thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.